Hello everyone, welcome back to the NRW. I'm your host today, Rob Medina, and I want to thank you all very much for joining me here today. And as you can tell right now, I am not on the video because I had attempted to do this review at the beginning of the week. I was going to be recording the video, editing it, and then having it uploaded on the channel at the beginning of the week, but then something had come along the way that prevented me from doing that. So now that I have a window of opportunity to do this here, although a small window of opportunity, I figured I'll just go into this review rather quickly and just go off the cuff. So hopefully you guys will enjoy with what I'm about to get into. The film I'm reviewing is going to be for The Warriors. This is a movie that came out back in February 1979, so this year does mark the 43rd anniversary of the film's release. And the story of this film goes as follows. In the near future, a charismatic leader summons the street gangs of New York City in a bid to take it over. When he is killed, the Warriors are falsely blamed and now must fight their way home while every other gang is hunting them down. So that right there is the film in a nutshell. I actually had heard about the Warriors when I was a little kid. I think I might have been in the 3rd or 4th grade. I remember watching TV and I saw a commercial for the Warriors because they were announcing it was going to be airing later that evening on whatever channel it was that I was watching. I do vaguely remember thinking the movie looked interesting if I recall correctly, but what I do distinctly remember was the vest, the iconic Warriors vest that they all were wearing in the scene that I was watching, and I thought it looked so cool and I wanted one of those vests. But for whatever reason, I never got around to watching the movie. But I have heard about the film more throughout the years, kind of sporadically though. And it wasn't until the release of the DVD special edition director's cut that came out, I forgot how many years ago it was, but at that time, the Warriors' popularity was coming at an all-time high again, it looks like. It definitely had a big cult following. Even to this day, it still very much has a cult following. But at that time, it seemed like it was reaching at a whole new heights of popularity where it was warranted to at least release a DVD with those special features, with new interviews, more behind-the-scenes stories, and then the new additional scenes that were added into the director's cut, which I'll be getting into in a little bit here. So when I saw the movie for the first time, I remember distinctly thinking that this is a good film. I didn't love it at first. Not that I thought it was not any good. It was a good film, but I just remember not loving it. But I just thought it was a good film, a really good film. But nowadays, I do love this movie. But at the time, I do remember thinking that I thought this movie reminded me so much of a comic book. For whatever reason, it had those comic book aesthetics that I thought worked very effectively for this film. And I actually thought it was based on a comic book. Then I come to find out that it's actually based on a novel of the same name written by the author Sol Urich, who I believe wrote the book, and it was released back in 1965, if I'm not mistaken. And from what I read, the director Walter Hill had wanted to put a lot of these comic book elements into the original theatrical cut, but for whatever reason, Paramount at that time thought it was not a good idea, so they opted not to do that. And then when it was released on DVD with that special director's cut, those comic book elements were definitely added to the movie now, where you have certain scenes that will end in these comic book panels, and then another scene will start up in those comic book panels and then transition into the narrative, of course. So I thought in that respect, it worked so good, and I can see why Walter Hill thought the movie would fit with those comic book aesthetics that we are so accustomed to now these days. But of course, depending on what comic book film you watch, it's not always going to be the same across the board, but most films nowadays do have a certain quality, a certain look to them that you can identify as a comic book film. This movie was certainly one of those films. So in a lot of ways, it was kind of ahead of its time in that respect. So the other thing I also had learned about the book too, which I've never read, was that in the book, the gang is not called the Warriors as they are in the film. They're actually called the Dominators. So there was another thing that I had learned after I saw the film for the first time that I'm going to get into here, which is that in the novel, the gang is basically a African-American Hispanic gang. It was all African-American and all Hispanic. They made up this gang called the Dominators. Walter Hill, I recall, if I read correctly, had wanted to cast an all African-American and Hispanic cast for the part of the Warriors. And at the time, according to Walter Hill, Paramount said it's not a good idea for commercial reasons. When I first heard that, I remember thinking that's fucked up. But when I saw the movie for the first time, and I have to clarify with what I mean by what I'm trying to point out as a positive here, because I don't agree at all with what Paramount had said at that time, according to Walter Hill had informed us here. But when I saw the movie, I remember distinctly thinking that this movie was so ahead of its time, where you have a gang that are working together from different ethnicities. You have a Caucasian man, you have several Caucasian guys, African Americans, Latinos, all working together to try to get home. And not once did I ever recall that race was a thing. In fact, there were many other gangs that also had the same type of background too, with different people from different ethnic backgrounds that were working together, just working out of their respective boroughs though, of course. So I don't recall ever once feeling that race was an issue. In fact, it was all about the characters. That's what really made the film so good, in my opinion. So when I had learned about what Paramount had said, according to Walter Hill, that casting an all African American and Hispanic cast was not going to work because of commercial reasons, I don't buy it. But I do think about, though, that if it was cast with nothing but African American and Hispanics, would the film have worked as well? I do believe it will. Would it have made the film any better? I'm not sure about that, but I do know that it still would have been an effective film regardless. But the fact that you got to see many different people from different ethnicities working together, that actually was a positive thing, in my opinion. And again, as it wasn't until I learned it after the fact about what was going on behind the scenes that did bother me, though. But I'm not going to say that I agree with the approach they took here, but I do appreciate the fact that the race was never the forefront. It was just about the characters, and that to me was very, very important to me. So I appreciate that, despite my disagreements about what went on behind the scenes for these commercial reasons here. The other thing I want to point out as a positive is this. Now, I've never read the novel at all. I do know that the novel does take a rather dark turn, and to some degree the narrative is slightly different though. But in the novel, the amount of violence is very heavy in this film, and even some of the sexualization of women is very much stronger in that novel. Whereas in the movie, on the other hand, you kind of get hints of that, and it never actually goes down that direction. The only character in in the movie, the character of Ajax, played by the actor James Remar, is really the only dark character. He's actually one of the most popular characters as well too in this film. But the character does show some signs of humanity, but at the same time, he clearly is the hothead of the group. He's the guy that is willing to do whatever it takes to survive, but in a lot of ways, you kind of get a feeling he's looking out for himself, but he definitely does serve a purpose in being with the gang, where he actually does have some major qualities that is very helpful for the gang, but he's a loose cannon. There's a part in the movie where he approaches a female, where he really makes these strong advances to her, and he's just pretty much forcing himself on her as it progresses from there. And it turns out she's an undercover cop, and he handcuffs him to the park bench, and then calls the cops over, and then he is freaking out where he's going to go to jail. So in that respect, the character does get what he deserves, and he turns out to be one of the most popular characters too, which is kind of ironic. But the fact of the matter is that because a character of that magnitude of darkness, where he was really going to be going as far as committing this sexual act where he's pretty much going to be raping the woman, I have to say that I'm glad they did that, because if they actually did go down that dark route for the film, would it have made the film any better? I don't think it would have made it any better, but I do appreciate that they have hints of those elements with some of these characters, but they actually never went that far down that line. In fact, they actually do show that there are consequences for these actions, and these characters pay for that. So I do appreciate that as well. But as far as anything else is concerned with this film, I mean, there's so many iconic things that occur in this movie. One of the biggest examples of that is the character of Cyrus, who has one of the most iconic lines in Hollywood history with "Can you dig it?" His speech in the beginning of the film is one of the most impressive things I've seen. I remember when I saw that scene for the first time, I was blown away, because it's one of the most epic scenes in the entire film. So the actor that plays him is a gentleman by the name of Roger Hill, who had passed away. I forgot how far back here, but he definitely does deliver a iconic performance. And although he's in the film for very little though, but people remember him the most, apart from Ajax and many of the other warrior characters as well too. But his presence alone in the film certainly is kind of like the catalyst of what to be expecting with this movie and how epic the film is, because it definitely is an epic movie. And I will also point out too that although when it comes to the violence in this movie, it's never over the top. It's kind of a slight heightened reality aspect to it, but I do appreciate the fact that they just kept it pretty standard, if that makes any sense. But I will also point out too that you can tell that, given the amount of time that they have and given the amount of resources that are available, they've done the best they can. But in comparison to some of the action sequences you get now these days, this is this is a very tame version of that. So I do remember at the time when I saw the movie that the action sequences were good, but they weren't, I don't recall them being memorable. The only thing that really stuck out for me that were more memorable really were the characters and the journey that they go through. Those were the more memorable parts of the film. Everything else, in terms of the action, was actually my least favorite about the film. So I found that to be kind of strange, because it turns out to be that's one of the favorite things where the people loved about the movie. But for me, it's actually my least favorite thing about the film. It's not bad by any means. It's actually really well done, but I just think it was just okay. But it still is an effective form of action sequences that we do see in this film that do work very well. But again, in comparison to other stuff that I've seen lately, it's okay for me personally. But I think that's really the only real negative of the film, apart from, one other thing I almost forgot to mention is that the movie runs at 94 minutes long. I actually would have liked to see the film a bit longer. I would have liked to see a little bit more time with the characters, because you do actually get quality time with the characters. Really decent, I wouldn't say decent, I would take that back. Really good character moves, I meant to say, but there are moments I feel like I wish I would have gotten more with these characters. So I would think that maybe an additional 10, maybe 15 minutes long to add to this film would certainly help out expand some of those character moments that I would have really liked to have seen more of there. But otherwise, that's really my thoughts on the film. And so if I'm going to give a rating for this movie, I would say this movie definitely is a solid cheers. Can you dig it? And those are my thoughts on the film. If you have seen the movie, let me know what you guys think in the comment section down below. And if you haven't done so already, make sure you subscribe to the channel, make sure you share and like our videos, and hit that notification bell while you're down there. And you can also follow the NRW on social media. On Instagram, New Release Wednesdays, on Facebook, Nerds Rule the World, and on Twitter, @the_NRW. And you can follow me on my social media accounts. On Instagram and Twitter, Mr. Rob Medina, and on Facebook, simply just Rob Medina. And I have a show on the channel called You're So Cool with Rob Medina, and make sure you follow the show's social media accounts. On Instagram, You're So Cool with Rob Medina, and on Twitter, You're So Cool WRM. And I want to thank you all very much for checking out this review. Until next time, everybody, you guys stay safe out there, and cheers.